What's going on YouTube? It's Tom here and we're back with another in-depth steel video today. I did this on Venatus 4 Extra and I asked you guys what you guys thought of this style of video, and the response was overwhelmingly positive, so thank you, and we're going to continue to do that for multiple steels here in the future. Today what I got in front of me is a steel that I've been trying to get my hands on for a long time, and the secondary market prices just haven't allowed me to do that. I'm not going to spend a boatload of money on something that was originally half that or even a third of the price that they're asking for on the secondary market. So when I was asked by a viewer if I wanted to test this knife, obviously my response was yes. He told me to keep it for a couple weeks, sharpen it, use it, and I'm really grateful for that. So thank you. I'm going to put his Instagram down in the description below. So here we go into the video. So the steel that we got in front of us is REX 45. So you guys have probably heard a lot about REX 45. It's a steel that has a lot of hype around it right now, and it seems to be pretty difficult to get. I looked up the prices. The militaries are somewhere in like the $300 range, secondary market, which is absolutely stupid. PM2 and Para 3 are like $400, which is also absolutely stupid. So it seems like if you want to get your hands on REX 45, a military is probably your best bet. Cheapest way in. Anyhow, let's talk about REX here. A little bit about the steel. It's a high-speed tool steel made by Crucible. It's used in the Spyderco military family sprints sometime around in 2018. I can't remember exactly when it came out, but there's a PM2, a Para 3, and a military. I think that's it. And ever since it's been released, it's received overwhelmingly high praise from everybody who's used it. Everyone really seems to like it. I know we've had a couple of these Rockwell tested. The militaries are somewhere between, I want to say 66, 67. This one hasn't been tested yet, but it's going to be. So this is a steel that can get very hard. The composition of this stuff, 1.3% carbon, 6.25% tungsten, 3% vanadium, 4% chromium, 5% moly, 8% cobalt, 0.3% manganese, 0.5% of silicon, and trace amounts of phosphorus and sulfur. So the element that really stands out there is the cobalt, the 8%. That is what enables it to get super hard, and cobalt also enables steels to have super hot or super good red hot hardness, but that's not really something that's useful in knives. That's more for industrial applications where parts may be getting hot and they want their steels to remain hard at that temperature. So for those of you who are a little bit more chemically inclined, that composition may look pretty familiar. That's almost identical to M4. The only difference I think from M4, I'm going to throw a graph up on the screen here. M4 doesn't have any cobalt, so REX 45 can get harder. And I want to say REX has 1% less vanadium than M4 does. Other than that, they're almost identical. And we're going to get into that here in a little bit. First up, we have corrosion resistance. I really didn't put it through many situations where corrosion could really happen on this. I was trying not to let that happen because, once again, it's not my knife. There were some small rust spots on it from the viewer near the hole and as well as the jimping. You guys might be able to see a couple little spots here just to the left of CPM and a couple more up by 45. Just some real small rust spots there. I don't know what kind of environment he lives in or what he's putting this thing through, but rust is definitely a concern there. And it's definitely because of the low chromium percentage is going to be prone to rust and patina. That's all I really have for corrosion resistance, so we're going to go ahead and move on to sharpening. On the first sharpening of REX 45, I had to reprofile this. I just took it to my standard 18 degrees per side. One side was dead on, the other side not so much, and that took me over 2 hours to reprofile. This is a very wear resistant steel, so it definitely took some work. The other thing I noticed within the 2 to 3 sharpenings that I put on this knife is that it has a very unique feel, something that I've only ever felt on Maximate, and that is because they're both high hardness steels. my diamond stones just kind of seem to skate over the steel, and it doesn't seem to take off quite as much as something in like S30V, S35VN, VG10, that kind of thing. Those stones tend to dig in a little bit more, and at this high of a hardness, it just kind of feels like the stones are skating off, and they obviously aren't cutting nearly as fast as what they would on a softer steel. It's an interesting feel. You know as soon as you are sharpening. And the other thing I noticed was the edge came up super fine, very similar to M4, which is to be expected with compositions as similar as they have. I put, I think, 3 total edges on this knife, maybe 4. The last edge, the edge right before I did edge retention testing, was by far the best, the most crisp. It's one of the sharpest I've ever had. It was cutting paper towels straight off the stones right after deburring, and then it was whittling hair off of the strops, which is awesome. Super sticky edge, but it still has a lot of aggression to it because it's a higher carbide steel. It kind of has like those little micro serrations that give you the aggression, but they're still polished and refined, so you still get the fine cutting ability. It's really, really unique. So I documented all of my use with Rex 45, so that's what we're going to go ahead and talk about now. This is something I didn't do in Venatus 4, but I plan on doing from here on out. Something very similar to like what I did with the Maximet experience. We're just going to be going over all the use I put this thing through. Now, I only documented use for about five or 6 days or so. That's because I only had this thing for about 2 weeks. I put it through more work than I normally would my own knives during that time span. I was cutting everything that I possibly could just to test this steel as quickly as I could and get it back to the viewer. So the first day I sharpened it to 600 grit and then strapped on 16 and 4 micron CBN on leather. I used a sweeping motion to refine the scratch pattern, which if you guys follow me on Instagram, you would have saw that. Scratch pattern looked beautiful. It's been a long time since I've done that. I normally do just the up and down motions, and I decided to try it with the sweeping motions to see what would happen. So that first day I cut 9 small boxes, 4 medium boxes, 9 large boxes, opened 1 knife box, and cut 18 feet of cardboard. That's a decent amount of use. That's a lot for one day. Not as far as cardboard cut, but a lot of boxes opened. The edge ended up being pretty raggedy when cutting through paper. There were some pretty small spots of deformation, and I just decided to go ahead and fully resharpen it. I took it up to 1000 grit and then the 16 and 4 micron strops as well, and I just did the up and down strokes only. High carbide steels don't tend to do too well with the sweeping motions for that scratch pattern. They like the up and down motions. It just promotes more of the micro serrations, and it just seems to cut better and last a little bit longer. So the next day I cut 3 small boxes, 1 medium box, opened a knife box, cut 126 feet of cardboard, and stripped 4 wires. I was trying to test this thing a little bit, see how good the edge stability was. So after all that, there was a few very small spots of visible deformation. It was still cutting computer paper well, and a bit more coarse, but it's still very easily cut. The small spots of deformation were from stripping those wires. I bit into a couple wires on accident with it, and it deformed the edge just a tiny bit. It was almost impossible to see it unless you got it in the perfect light. The next day we opened 1 clamshell package, and I went straight through the hard corners, so I cut through them instead of avoiding them, and like I said, I was just trying to test edge stability, and there was absolutely no edge damage from that. Then I cut 156 feet of cardboard, opened 2 small boxes, and it was still cutting computer paper, but raggedy. 1 small spot where it hung up, and there's slightly more visible deformation than the previous day, so it was still very, very good. The next day we had 2 small boxes, 1 large box, and 6 feet of cardboard. So all in all, we had roughly 300 feet of cardboard or so, as well as the other use, which is pretty darn good. I'd be very happy to have that out of my daily user. So that's all I did for the daily testing. If I really wanted to do something in-depth like I did with Maximet, I'd have to have this knife for months, and I'm not going to do that to the viewer who sent it in. After all of our daily use was done, I decided to go ahead and run an edge retention test because I had feelings on this steel that it performed very similar to M4. It just felt very similar. If you gave me both steels and didn't have either one labeled, I probably wouldn't be able to tell, other than in sharpening. I could tell this one's a little bit harder in sharpening. So I decided to run an edge retention test just to see how close they are. I ran the test under the normal parameters, 200 to 1000 grit diamond, 16 and 4 micron CBN on leather, and then I go ahead and cut computer paper, or well, if I cut computer paper until it would no longer cut computer paper, it'd be a long test. I cut cardboard until it would no longer cut computer paper reliably. So after all of that testing, I got 433.83 feet, which is a damn good result, but eerily similar to M4. If you guys look back at my video on the Benchmade Griptilian that I had in M4 from the custom shop, it did very similar. It was, I want to say, right around 400 feet, so this did a little bit more, but that's kind of to be expected with the higher hardness. But it just performs very, very similarly to M4. And I did have to note, I forgot, this is about 24 thousandths behind the edge. The Griptilian in M4 was also about 24, 25 thousandths behind the edge, so that was pretty darn good test between the two. Just performed very similarly to M4, so just that was kind of the thoughts I was having of it just through daily use, and then the results kind of backed my feelings up. As far as toughness goes in the steel, I never really put it into a situation to test that, and I'm not going to test it because it's not my knife. I'd be devastated if something like this, or something happened to it, if there was an inclusion in the steel and it just broke in half, and then I'd have to pay for a $300 military on the secondary market, so I'm not going to do that. Edge stability, I'm also not going to test that like I did in the previous video, but I can talk a little bit on that just from my use. It seems to have very, very good edge stability, and that's probably due to the high Rockwell hardness that this steel is at. If this is the same as the other two militaries that have been tested, you can almost definitely attribute the high edge stability to the high hardness. And the other thing I noticed is that this did not show edge deformation easily. It took a long time. It's, like I said, very similar to Maximate in that regard as well. Them both being high hardness steels, it's harder for them to show edge deformation. You really have to put it through some use for it to show any sort of shiny spots on the edge or any sort of then they don't roll. They don't roll. That's just how it is. That's why I prefer higher hardness steels like Maximate and steels like this, because if it rolls, it's harder to cut with. If it chips, you can still cut with it, but these steels tend to not want to roll or chip. So just a really, really, really good steel overall as far as edge stability goes. Very happy with that. And that brings me to my conclusion here on REX 45. It's an excellent steel if high edge retention is what you're after and stainlessness isn't a concern for you. If it is a concern for you, you can obviously patina it, you can acid wash it, you can do something to prevent it. The high edge stability is great for everyday use, making it easier to strap back and more time between sharpenings. Obviously, if you're not having a rolled edge or chipping your edge, it's going to be easier to strap a slightly fatigued edge back than it would be if it was a softer steel and was rolling on you. And this brings me to my main point here, and I feel like I might hurt some feelings on this with this one. It's definitely a top tier steel, but it's totally not worth the secondary market prices. It basically feels like an overhyped M4. There's knives out there in M4 already that are reasonable price. You can get a custom shop Griptilian for a good price. You got the Benchmade Super Freak for a good price. You got the Gale Bradley 2 from Spyderco. You got the Advocate from Spyderco. I don't even think some of the M4 Sprints from Spyderco are reaching these prices. So if you have M4 already, you pretty much know how REX 45 feels, other than it feeling a little funky on the stones because of the high hardness. So those are my feelings on this steel. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about Rex 45. I know there's a lot of people out there that love it, so I feel like I might get some disagreement down in the comments, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with you guys. Once again, thank you to the viewer who sent it in. Like I said, I will link his Instagram down in the description below, and this knife will be going to get hardness tested, so I will update you guys when I have info on that. So if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like down below. Subscribe to continue to see more videos just like this one. The in-depth videos have been a lot of fun for me to test and record for, and if you guys enjoy that type of video, let me know down in the comments below as well. Anyhow, guys, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.